I'm gonna take this workshop in English because it was a common agreement, so I hope that's okay with everyone. And if you have any questions for me on the way, don't feel shy, just raise your hand and let's talk about it. Let's have a real good discussion. I'm gonna talk today about test, iterate, and how to pivot your product for a better market fit. But before we and this is the agenda, so we're going to start with a brainstorm session. Then I'm going to talk about design thinking, build, measure, learn loop, usability testing versus product market fit testing, and qualitative testing. So the first thing, it's a brainstorm. So I thought it's going to be good to have like a 7-minute brainstorm so everyone gets like the energy. The brainstorm has 2 rules. So the first rule is yes and. So how this is going to work? I'm going to ask you a question. You will come up with ideas, solutions, whatever. Just raise your hand and just shout it out. Every time you come up with a solution, you should put yes and in front of the solution. So for example, how do you peel an orange? You can cut it. Yes, and you can peel it with your hands. Yes, and you can just throw it away. Yes, and you don't need an orange. So this is the first rule. The second rule is don't judge. Don't judge your ideas before saying them out loud. Don't judge other people's ideas, because at this stage, all ideas are good. And before we get to a brilliant idea, we need to get rid of all good ideas. So if everything is clear, no questions, all good? Okay, let's go. How can you fail a startup? Yeah?
Yes, and maybe don't do a startup.
Don't do a startup. Yes? Yes, and you can find a shitty co-founder.
Yes, and you can spend all the money you shouldn't spend.
Yeah.
Yes, and your idea is not actual.
Yes.
Yes, and never share your ideas because someone will
Steal it.
steal it.
Exactly.
Yes, and I can learn so much from failing.
Yes?
Yes, and don't validate.
Yes. Well, this is fun. Thank you for being active here. Oh, that's. So now I'm gonna tell a bit what I did. In this brainstorm, I used 2 strategies. So the first strategy was to force you to say yes and before every solution. And this strategy comes from positive intelligence. And this is a really nice concept. They have a book. I really Google it and learn more about it. The concept, every time you say yes and before a solution, you trick your brain to validate the idea. So you already are open to other ideas. So in this way, you make everyone feel comfortable and get into their creative mood without feel judgment. So this is a good one. And the second one was the reverse brainstorming. So instead of me asking you, how can you solve something? I asked you, how can you fail on something? It's always hard to come up with the best ideas, and every time you brainstorm, you try to do the best. So then you get stuck, and you get stuck on your usual stuff. If you change the perspective, you let the pressure off, you let your brain to go wild. That's how you get the out of the box ideas. And if you really have good ideas, then you can just reverse them and build on them. So every time you are you stuck? Try to brainstorm, try to change your perspective, and if this doesn't work and you're still stuck, check if you have the right problem. If you don't have a solution, you don't have a problem. So, and for that, you would need to deploy the design thinking process. Design thinking, it's a non-linear and iterative process. And its main goal is to help you to identify the customer pain, like the deeply pain. Before assuming the best solution for a problem, make sure you actually understand the problem, you understand the customer needs, and also understand how their environment changes the problem. So I'm gonna give you an example to make it a bit more relatable. you have a person and they are complaining about multiple remotes on a TV. A first solution would be for you to take all the remotes, put it into one, have a giant remote, hey, solution. But if you take the time and actually go deeper and start asking questions like, why do you have multiple remotes? When is the most painful that you pick the wrong remote? What do you try to do when you try to find the remote? So then you ask questions around, get more answers, and maybe you're gonna find out that what actually happens is that the person comes home and it's dark. It's dark and they search for the remote. They search for the remote because they want to turn on a bit of light, but not turn on all the lights, because then it's gonna wake up like other family. And then when they try to find the remote control, they can't find it. And if they find one, it's the wrong one. So now if you change the perspective and you really ask the user, your problem changed. In the moment that your problem changed, your solution opened up. You can bring other solution. It's not, every problem has multiple solutions. Every right problem has even more solution. The design thinking process, it has 5 steps. And the first one is empathize, which really means you have to feel the pain of your user. To really understand how to solve a problem best, you need to feel it. You need to understand what's so painful about it. Why do they need a solution? How badly they need a solution. The second step, it's a define. Define means you have to define the problem, you have to define the user, you have to define the environment, you have to define all the important steps. Then you ideate. Here you have brainstorm session, you get multiple solutions, you prototype some of them, and then you test. And then you can always go in a loop, or you can just go from prototype to define again, or to ideate, depends on how it's your result. A common misconception is that, here's a few frameworks that will help you to apply design thinking. And you have, for example, these are the few. There are tons of them, and they are every day more and more. So you just Google for it, and then you're gonna find a ton of. Every framework is designed for a specific step. So you have the journey map is designed for finding the problem or defining it. So it's very important when you choose what frame to use for your solution, that it fits with yourself first. There's many that do the same, and it fits to your product. And then it fits to the stage that you are in the design process. A very big misconception is that design thinking it's for designers. It's not. Design thinking it's for everyone. Everyone that has a problem to solve can use design thinking to solve it. And this can be applied from creating a business model to sell solar panels in Africa to just build a new education system. It's really can apply to anything. It's more like how do you think about the problem and how do you find the problem. And one common pitfalls when doing the design thinking and really building a startup, it's falling in love with your idea. It's your baby, we all have one. But keep in mind that a problem has so many solutions. The fact that you chose one solution does not make it the best. It does not make it that things don't change. Your users change every day. The market changes every day. Technology advances so fast. You need to be able to keep up. In order for you to keep up, you have to be in love with your problem. If you are in love with your problem, then your focus will allow you to actually notice all these changes and pivot the product accordingly. A very successful company that is a good example for this is Kodak. Kodak, it's a company, it was very successful. I remember it since I was here. I was buying the 36 and 24 films. That was nice. Kodak, their main business is selling film photography. That was their business. They were selling cheap cameras and then very expensive films. So the idea was like they're gonna buy a camera and afterwards they're gonna keep buying the films. Kodak, Kodak started to lose traction in the moment that digital imaging came into the market. They did not trust it. They thought it's going to be a hype, so they didn't pay too much attention. The first digital camera that was invented, it was an engineer from Kodak. So basically there was someone there was telling them, hey, this is the future, you should really invest into it. They thought that the digital camera will cannibalize their film business. And it was true, because if you give a digital camera, people will buy less films. So they didn't pivot. In early 2000, digital photography became mainstream. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Looking back at Kodak, in the beginning, they actually did identify the needs and the desires of their people. They built a product for the masses. This is the most hard target group you can ever have. And they were successful. They were a hit for a long time. What they failed to do is to actually anticipate that their target will change. Like not the target will change, but the people needs will change. And in the moment the technology advanced, that's what happened. And they just didn't see it or saw it, but just didn't acknowledge it. So keep your focus on the problem and try to pivot when it's the right time. A complementary process that you can combine with design thinking is the build, measure, learn. And this really comes from the Lean Startup. And Lean Startup, it's a concept or a process methodology that was invented for businesses to reduce waste. And by waste, I mean you don't have to build a full product, you build piece by piece, iterate, and slowly you get to your product. The process really starts with a hypothesis. You really should have something that you think is true, and you want to test it to the market if this is actually true. The first step is build, and build sounds very buildy. You don't have to have a product. When I say build here, it can be really anything, a mock-up, a prototype, a marketing campaign. What is important is build, you have to build a test to put it in the market so you can validate or invalidate your idea. Whatever that test looks like, a prototype, a final product, I don't know, a type form, it doesn't really matter as long as it serves its purpose. The second step is measure. And measure, we tend to measure everything in statistic data, like how many likes I had on my post, how many visits, how many they clicked on this button. But on this measure, you should really take all the learnings you take from the user. If you talk to someone and you learn something new, you can measure that. It doesn't have to be statistical. You don't have to put it in a KPI. You have to measure something so you can understand how do you pivot. Do people talk more about this or more about that? That's measure enough. So don't focus only on statistical data. And the learn is the most interesting one. Here you need to learn first if you validated or invalidated your hypothesis. But you also need to learn if you validate it, what do you do next? This is very common. I came here in Moldova and I met the startups, and most of people ask, okay, but what's next? I think I validated, like I have the numbers, but what do I do next? So every time you validate something and you want to learn, you need to learn if you validate it and what's next, what you actually validate. What was the small piece that it's interesting for people. But if you also invalidate, then you need to understand what went wrong. What was the part? Is it the hypothesis wrong? Do you need to go back to the hypothesis? Do you need to get back to the measure? Do you need to get back to the build? Maybe the test was wrong. So it's very important every time you create a loop to get the goals. What do you build and what do you learn? And how do you test it? And here is a very good diagram that expresses how can you combine design thinking and the lean loop. So here on the this is, I don't know what side it's yours. The green part is the design thinking. So here it's really about defining the problem. You empathize with the user, you find your right problem. And once you define it and you ideate and you have few ideas, how does that work? Then you enter into the build, measure, learn loop. Because you learned you have a problem, you have a solution, and then you need to build a test so you can validate it. So this is a bit how do you combine. And the good part about if you combine them is that if you do the design thinking methodology and you find the right problem, that means you found your problem solution fit. So you actually have a problem, but you also have a solution to it, and they have a fit. And if you do the loop, then you're gonna get the market product fit, which means I have a problem, I have a solution, but I also found who is interested in this solution. So that's a bit how they go together. Yes. Few things to consider when defining a loop is to have clear objectives. If you don't have a clear objective, what are you building, why are you building, what are you trying to achieve, what outcomes are you looking for, it's going to be mixed. You're not going to get any good results, or you're going to get some results, but you don't know how to apply them. Second, how much time will take to test? This is very, very important. There are products that that you can test them in half an hour, and the user gets to a full cycle and they understand the value of the product. And you have products that you need more time for the user to get the full cycle. And to give you an example, with a company the other startup that I'm working with, we have an ecosystem of products. The products are for the same company, but there is a product the user can go in and he needs 30 minutes to understand if this product is right for him or what is wrong. 30 minutes. And then we have a different product, and that product, it takes from a week to several months for a user to go to the full cycle and really understand if this brings a good value. So every time you do a test, do take in consideration how much time people would need to actually understand what you want to give to them. And the last one is the test has to be adaptable. We all have this, everyone who build a product, you have this perfect flow. The user is going to come in here, they're going to click this button, they're going to go there, they're going to find this, and this is awesome, this is perfect. And then you have a user and it goes there and clicks on the wrong button. Everyone does that. The moment you make your product to be adaptable, and adaptable I mean you let the user to go a different flow but not be wrong. You let the user to use your product for a different problem. This is the moment you're gonna learn. This is the moment you're gonna learn why the user does certain things. You can see a better flow, or maybe not, but you're gonna see how a normal user would use your product. And if you do it adaptable, then they're not gonna stop at the beginning saying like, oh, I don't need this. But they will find a way through the product, and then you can learn from it. Yes, there are two types of tests that happens when you try to find your market fit, and they usually get mixed. I think in front of the user you cannot separate them, but you should understand the feedback and treat it accordingly. The first one is usability testing. Usability testing, it's really, is it easy to use? Can a user find how to go to support? Can they go navigate back? Can they click the button? So it's just how easy it is to use your product. A very important step of the usability is accessibility. Accessibility is making sure that, and you should really test for this, and by testing I mean test with colorblind people, with busy people, with big thumbs, with ADHD, dyslexia, anything that makes sense for your product. But your product should never stop a person to use it just because they have a condition that you did not think about. So, and I think accessibility it's really important to test, and I suggest, you can use plugins today. There's tons of plugins website, you can put your app and then you get all the gaps. But I really suggest to test with real people, because besides the fact that with real people you validated your product or not, you also get more information, more learnings from a different group, what they need, can your product fulfill their needs as well. And accessible products are not just easy to use. Accessible products are easy to use all the time. So let's say you test with people that have ADHD. They have a very short attention span, but they have the same attention span as a busy person, as a distracted person, as a stressed person, as an anxious person. So it's really you, by testing for accessibility with people, you make sure that your product, if used in situations that people feel stressed, anxious, or in a different environment, they can use your product. It's not going to be a problem, because you can't control the environment, but you can control that it's not going to be an issue for your product. So do that. Also, when testing for usability testing, you need to observe the user. People say things that they don't think. I mean, they don't say everything they think. We want to please sometimes, and usually the behavior of a person tells you more. Like, when do they feel confused? When do they feel stuck? Do they spend more time into a place? So pay attention to the user, how they perform, or what behavior they have during the test. You can do accessibility testing with everyone. And if you don't have a product very niche that has a very specific group, then you can just do it with anyone. It's really good to do it with someone that never saw your product, because then you can get new and fresh eyes. Product market fit testing. Product market fit testing, it's really about how much value does your product bring to someone. And here it's really, you need to find why it brings value and to whom it brings value. So this is really, if you find the why and you find the whom, then you have the market fit, because then you can just expand on that. When you test for product market fit, sometimes the usability gets on the way. If you have a product that has bugs, or it's not clear flow, people will get distracted. People will stop at, oh, but this button is not blue, or oh, but this checkbox it's not aligned, or you have a typo. So try to find your usability to be to a level where it doesn't bother the user. That's why it's important to understand the feedback when it comes, if it's usability or if it's value. Then you understand, if they complain about usability, you can fix it and test it again. You have not get any fit on the value, didn't even get any feedback on the value. So it's also important not to overdo it. Don't add fun animations, stickers, too much color, because then you distract the person. And you also can make it fun for them. And if you make it too fun, they're gonna validate your product, but maybe they didn't get any value of it, because they didn't get the chance to actually understand if they have any value. So try to, a rule of thumb, if it's not part of your core value hypothesis, don't do it on the test. If you are not sure if it's part of your core value, don't include it in the test. Make your test clear, so then you help the user to focus on the value, so then you actually get feedback on the value and not on something else. Yes. Few factors that influences your product market testing. And here is the hypothesis. Did you find the real problem? Is the problem that you are finding a good one? Target group. If you ask the wrong people, you're gonna get the wrong answer. So it's important to whom you ask. Product. Is your product good? Is your solution really good? Maybe the hypothesis it is, maybe the target group it is, but maybe your solution is not good enough. It's important to understand when you do the test, like what went wrong. Like that's why it's important to learn to every test, because then you need to understand which of this you need to change and which of this you need to adapt. In early days, we're very inclined to give our product for free in exchange of feedback. Giving the product for free, good idea. In exchange of feedback, don't do it. If you give your product for free in exchange that the user will give you feedback so you can build more, how do you know if the user needs of a non-paying customers are the same as to a paying customer? You don't know that. You also don't know what are the reasons behind of that person giving you feedback, because if they find it valuable, why are they not paying for it? So it's very important to know who to listen to. It's hard to find those people, but if you find them, then those are the people to listen to. So how do you find those people? This is the technology adoption life cycle. In the beginning, we have the innovators, and here it's really, there are people in this world that they really like the new stuff. Like, I want to have the latest in the game, and I'm gonna brag about it. And usually these people, they don't care if your product is incomplete or it has bugs or it's not working properly. They care about this is the latest in the game. You have the early adopters, the visionaries. These ones, they can see the vision, they understand the problem, they agree with you, but your product needs to be a little bit good. Like, if it's incomplete, it's okay, but it has to work something. Then you have the chasm. The chasm, it's the most challenging part of startups. Like, if you're gonna die there probably. Like, most startups actually die there. And why is that? Because between the early adopters and early majority, it's a big shift for your product. The early majority, they want a finished product, a product that works, and a product that I can rely. This is the masses. So this is the general public. So if you got there, you are like a successful company. And then you have the late majority, and these people are really like, oh, if everyone joined, I'm gonna join as well. Like, it's good, it's safe, it's good to be there. And then you have the laggards, and the laggards are really the people that I don't want to change. Doesn't matter for me if it's smart or better, and if I have my way and I like it, and that's it. So they only change if they are forced, or it's like really don't have any other choice. For your product, you need to find who are your innovators, who are your early adopters, who it's the early majority, like every group, and also like who are the laggards. And the reason for that is that if you know who are they, you know whom to go to. You never should go to the laggards or to early majority or late majority. They're gonna kill your vision. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad or anything. If they don't see the vision, which they usually don't, they're just gonna kill it. So find those so you don't go to them just yet, because you're gonna get there. But find also your innovators and early adopters and use them to grow your product. Yes?
So you're saying, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying that each one of this might be different user personas, so you have to find one user persona and stick to it, like for a startup in the early days of the startup.
Yeah. Okay. No. I'm gonna give you an example. It should never be one person. If I'm a medical app in Moldova and I want to digitalize medical health, I mean, there is a need for that, absolutely. My innovators or early adopters would be the medical centers, for example, that just opened. If they just open, they have a need to be appealing to the population. So they would want to bring something new, something better, something innovative. I also would consider the medical centers that they combine, for example, wellness and medicine. They already went against traditional, right? So they also are open to something new. So they would probably agree with me to work on the solution or to be my first people. But if you think, are you from Moldova? Okay, Spitalul Republican. This is the Republican hospital. Sounds very political. I would never go there with my medical app because they are traditional. They are with a lot of bureaucracy. they haven't innovated since ever. Maybe I'm missing it, but I haven't seen any innovation, and they don't have any incentives to do any innovation. So if you would go there, they're probably like, yeah, I don't know, is this gonna happen? Like, it's gonna probably not. So it's more like, how do you find a target group that is here? And you can find them by different reasons. You have just to find, like, for your solution, what does it make sense? Who are the innovators? And who would adapt a new, like, your solution? Did it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. There are two types of tests, and there is qualitative and quantitative tests. And the qualitative testing, it's talking directly to the user. So an example would be, I have 2 meetings, one-on-one with 12 users. That would be a qualitative testing. You have an interview, you talk to them, you find out, you learn. The quantitative testing, it's when you test at a scale with large numbers of customers. And here an example would be, you build 2 landing pages, you do an A/B testing, you see which one has a higher conversion. That is a quantitative testing. The quantitative testing answers to the questions what and how many. So basically, what action did my user take? How many users did the same? Downside on the quantitative testing is you'd never know why. You never know why you have 5,000 users clicking on your commercial. You don't know. Maybe they misunderstood it. Maybe they understood it. So in early days, a quantitative testing can be hard to do because it's not as good. You get maybe it doesn't perform as good, and if it performs very good, then you don't really know why did it perform good, or if it didn't, why didn't. So you get missing on, like, the direction. In contrast, the qualitative testing, you find out the why. The reason behind every decision the user takes. Why did they click on that button? Why did they go to your website? Why is this happening? So knowing all the reasons, it's really going to help you to find the direction and to steer your product. Both tests are really valuable, but if you're a startup starting to develop, generally qualitative testing should really be your best friend. So then you first understand where you stay. Are people ready for this? Like, how close or far away are you from the market? And then you also can learn how can you get closer. There are 2 times where you can do a qualitative testing. It's really before you build and after you build. Before you build, you should really test with prototypes or anything to just make sure you're not too far away. After you build, you need to test how successful you were to actually validate your solution. And here I have some do's and don'ts. What you should do on a test. I got a lot of questions these days on this, so I'm trying to be practical as well. A first thing you should really do on a qualitative testing, like interviews, is to ask open questions. Yes and no question is going to lead you to yes and no. Open questions, it's going to give you more information, so then you're going to learn more. Always ask why. I don't know if you know about the 5 whys. There is a thing, you should always ask 5 times the why to make sure that actually the people telling you the right thing. Do that. The why is going to help you take the direction, understand, and get to know your customer. Repeat the key questions. Every interview has 1 or 2 questions that you really think it's important. These questions, put them at the beginning, at the end, change the wording, but have the same meaning. Sometimes people don't understand your questions. Sometimes people change their minds, and sometimes people lie. So make sure you actually get a rightful answer. Last question's an open question. You need to give, at the end of the interview, people should feel comfortable enough with you already. So then they will be more open to talk. You should always ask a last question to be open, like, oh, do you want to tell me something that you feel is important? Or like, is there something more that I didn't ask you about? So they can say things that you have never thought of. Like, you don't know what you don't know, ask the user. Assume you know nothing. This is very, very important. If you go to an interview, all the feedback you receive, it's good. There is no bad feedback. There is no wrong answers. Take everything in and don't give initial feedback to the user. Like, don't say, oh, this is right or this is wrong. There is nothing wrong. So take it in, don't sort it yet, and maybe at the end you're gonna find out that some small things that feels unimportant, at the last it's maybe a part of the bigger picture. So it may become important. Be ready to adapt. And here is the same. Sometimes we feel like our questions are really good. They are not to everyone the same. So make sure the person really understands your questions. And if it doesn't, it's not the same questions you have here. Your goal is always to learn and validate something. Keep to the goal and change the questions if necessary. And the don'ts. No leading questions, and this is super important. You can't ask a person, how awesome is my product? How good it is, right? You like it. Every time you put an emotion to the question, you will lead the user to give you that answer. And then you don't get anything. You really don't. You just get the validation on your bias, which you're not gonna do much about it. No instant feedback. And this is the same I mentioned before. Don't agree or disagree with any feedback you receive. People want to help. So if you say, yeah, they're gonna try to give you more answers like that because they feel like you validated their thinking. Keep it neutral. You want to know what they think, you want to know what they want and what they need. And for that, you are there just to learn, nothing more. Don't teach the user. Sometimes if you test an app, for example, you will have the necessity or the urge to show how to do it. Like, oh, but you go there to click that, or you should do that. If your app needs an onboarding, do an onboarding. Here is what we do. Here is what you can do. These are the features. These are the buttons. But once the users start testing, let them own the journey. See what they do. What are their reflexes? Do they like it? Do they go in a different way? Get inspired and learn. Don't ask for solution. You should really focus on the problem. You are there to create a better solution. If the user gives you a solution, then make sure it's the right one, because usually it's not. People don't know what they don't know. People seldom can really imagine the future or have the vision or understand your vision. That's why not everyone starts startups. So don't ask for solution, ask for problems, and if they go to the solution like, oh, but you can just put a button there and everything is going to be fine. No, try to understand what is their real problem, because then you can find a solution that's so much more better. When conducting a user testing, you should really aim to have 2 people in the room. And this is also like super important, because you have one person asking the questions and interacting with the user, and you have one person observing. So then first, we all have different experiences, different knowledge, and we perceive information based on that. So if you have a bias, you're gonna only hear what you want to hear. Having 2 people, you will get to have 2 opinions on what feedback was there. And then the second person can also observe, can look at the behavior, at the body language, and feel like, what is the difference between what's being said and what's being done? Maybe the person thinks he actually completed the task, but they never did. So then you can actually put this all together, and usually the right answer is the behavior and the body language. So trust on that rather than on the words that you hear. Yeah, that's on that. Observe what has not been said. There was one more slide that I forgot, probably. One thing that you should always keep in mind is that we are creators of habit. We get used to things all the time, small inconveniences. If you know the label on apples, the small one that you have to take it off before you eat, and then it's some glue that you have to scratch it off. Probably the first time you saw this or experienced this, you were annoyed. But now you don't notice that any longer. There's so many small inconveniences in our life, but we don't consider them a problem. Not because they're not a problem, not because the label became a solution in time. We got used to it. So every time you hear a person giving you feedback, be careful, or like try to understand where it comes from. Is it their family? Is it their environment? Is it a habit? It's important to understand why people say certain things. And if it comes, for example, from a habit, then the fact that they did not validate the problem, it does not make that it doesn't exist. It does exist, and in the moment you give a solution, they will understand, like, oh, this makes sense. But maybe on the validation, they will not be able to perceive that. So I'm stressing a lot on the fact that you should really talk to your users, but you should really talk to them and really try to understand like the reasons behind everything, because that is your real problem, and there you can make a change. And I want to close this workshop with by quoting Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. You should always ask people what they want. You should listen to them, listen to their problems, listen to what makes them tick, what brings them value, what makes them live. Take all of that information and put it in a solution that it fits seamless in their life, and it improves their quality of life. But also keep in mind, people don't always know what they want. People don't know what they have never seen or they have never experienced. I mean, they couldn't imagine a car because there was horses. I just want something better. So always remember that they don't know, and you should focus on the problem, and don't be afraid to bring a solution that it's not just better, but different. Thank you, and I hope you have questions. In Q&A, perfect. Oh, I might have. Okay, this is the after Marvel, after the movie. This is some books that I really recommended to read if you are in the product market fit. They're really helpful on the ways how to think and how to test and everything that I've been talking about. So if you find them